So this is a video film that we're making to document our Novak Polanski roots, our Czechoslovakian, Bohemian parts of who we are, and it's a film for your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and we're going to have you do a little singing, but maybe before you do that, you could talk a little bit about what you remember of your childhood. Now, it was your mother, our grandmother, who came over on the boat from Czechoslovakia, is that right?
Yes, and her name was Anna Polanski. And she was 4 years old when she came over with her mother and father, Mr. Joseph and Anna. They settled in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
And Grandpa worked in a stone masonry or something. And I haven't found out how she got to meet my dad, because although his parents came from Czechoslovakia, he was born in the United States and lived in New Prague. All those people, there were 10 in the family, brothers and sisters, and they all settled around New Prague, Minnesota. But somehow they got together. I don't know how. I wish I did, but she never told me that. And so then they were giving grants of land to, I think, probably to these people who came over. They promised them some land. And Grandpa got his 40 or 60 acres, I don't know what it was, and moved into the Renville County area, where he farmed for, well, a long number of years. And then when he retired, his son took over the farm, Frank, and Grandpa and Grandma lived in a little house back of Mother's. Well, my father, of course, died when I was only 6 years old. And so when...
and what did he die of, Mom?
He had diabetes.
Okay.
And in those days, there was no help for it. It was just starving him. And so he got really low, and then, he died. And so anyway, now I got off the track. What was I going to say?
You said he.
Oh yes. So then after my grandmother died, then he came to live with us, and he is the one who taught me how to play cards, and he taught me everything I know in Czech. And I wouldn't have learned the Czech language if it hadn't been for him, because of course Mother never talked it at home. But he would not answer me or talk to me unless I answered him in Czech, and he'd say, no English, no English. So I had to, and it was it paid off, because I went through high school, of course, and then a year of teacher training, and I got my first job as a teacher because I could speak Czech. It was in a Czech community back in Minnesota, and the little children came to me in the spring, pre-primary class, and they couldn't speak a word of English. So I had to teach them English, and they all learned it from me. So, so that helped me get a job. So it paid off, and I wish I could still speak it, but you see, no one has spoken to me in that language for so many years that I can't remember it. I can remember a few words. Like,
what do you remember?
Like potato is blambody, and butter is putter. And then I'll sing a song, and I'll give you some more Czech.
Okay, so go right ahead.
Okay, all right. Well, the first song I was going to sing was Šla Nika do Zeli, and I'll give you a little background. This is a little maiden, and she takes her basket and goes out to the garden. And she's picking leaves, and I suppose maybe cabbage leaves. I don't know why she didn't do the head, but that in the story it's leaves. And the word for leaves is lupeni. And then you'll remember that. And then while she was doing that, along came a young man. And he, I suppose, wanted to get her attention, so he crushed her basket. He stomped on her basket of leaves. And she was very angry, and she says, you. Now, I suppose she could have said you, something bad, but the way she said it, he knew that was you, and that's thi, and that'll be in the song. Thi, Det body's platiti. That she said, you're going to pay for this. And of course he was very arrogant, and he said, I will not pay for it. I would rather go to the army than pay for it. And so, so she just went after him again, thee, and that's the end of the song. Okay?
Okay.
So now I'll sing it if I can. Shlana ninka dozeli, nutter hala lupini, Shishel I was going to wear this. Shishel nani peppy check. All right. Lashla pali koshi check. The budish platiti. Now here he says. Ja, to platit nebudu, lerchi puda dovoinu. Shishel nani peppy check, loshla pali koshi check, the budish platiti. That's
Very nice. Thank you.
crazy words, aren't they? And I know another song. It's about rain, and you can tell that it's a song from old time because if it rained, they figured that they couldn't go home. I suppose they were horse and buggy, you know.
Sure.
And the word for rain is pershi. And yentolea means it was just pouring, and they were somewhere and they couldn't get home until bile dan a clear day. Okay. So that goes like this. Pershi, yentolea amidomu nepudem. Amidomu nepudem, Pershi, yentolea, amidomu nepudem, ashbude bileden, ashbude bileden, midomu napeden, ashbude bileden is clear day, see? And they're not going to go home. It's a clear day, and that's about it. That's all the check I can remember now.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay, honey, I think we can. Good morning, Mom.
Good morning, Kate.
Well, this morning we're going to do a recording of your history, or Herstory, of Marie Beatrice Novak McGinnity. And maybe you could start us off by talking a little bit about your early childhood, your early days in Olivia, Minnesota.
Okay. Well, I was born May 1st, 1914. The year also marked the beginning of World War I. And I had 2 sisters and 2 brothers. My one sister, Eleanor, died at the age of 14. And I was only 3 months old, so of course I never knew her. My older sister was 16 years older than I, so I was her flower girl at her wedding. My oldest brother, Raymond, was injured at birth, and the midwife taking care of Mother didn't spank him so that he got any oxygen, so he became an epileptic all his life. And after Dad died, Mother had to put him in an institution. He was a big fellow, and she could not take care of him alone, so doctors made her give him up. And that was very hard for her.
Yeah.
My younger brother, Van, was 6 years older than I, and well, we did a few things together, but not too much. He was too much older. He was running around with, his friends. So it was Mom and me. That was about it.
And Van was 6 years older than you, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And what was the house like that you lived in?
Oh, we lived in a great big house. It was a big brick house, and it had an upstairs and a downstairs and a full basement. And we had a lot of yardage. I suppose both of my parents at some time lived on a farm well, I know that when mother's maiden name was Polanski, and when her father came. Well, I should tell you about that, shouldn't I? About their voyage. She was 4 years old when her mother and father came from Czechoslovakia, and they settled in St. Paul, Minnesota, where my grandfather did stonemasonry work. And then I believe the government promised these people that would come over to this new country a portion of land. And so he got, I don't know, 40 acres or 60 acres or whatever it was, I don't know. But he then, when he earned enough money to buy that land, even though it was a grant, they had to pay something. And then the family moved to this farm in Renville County, which was near Olivia. And let's see, where am I now? Oh yes, and then anyway, we had a lot of yardage. We had enough for 2 big gardens and then a big lawn. And in fact, Mother gave that portion of it to my brother, and he and his wife built a house on it, and then they lived right in the corner there. Yeah.
And your mom raised chickens.
Oh yes, we had that was part of the yardage in the back, a full place for chickens to be raised, because they raised them for 2 reasons: for eating the meat, and they always kept a dozen hens or so for eggs. And when I was little, it was my chore after school to go out and pick the eggs that the hens had laid. And it was fun because, you didn't know how many there would be, and it was always kind of a challenge, just like finding gold, to find eggs. And the only thing is sometimes the hens got angry and they didn't want to get it. They wanted to, of course, their purpose in laying eggs was to hatch little chickens, you see. And so they would bite and peck at me, and that scared me. I was afraid of that. And but anyway, that kept us all busy. We had something to do all the time: feed the chickens, or do something to the garden or lawn, or one thing or another.
And what was the thing about the chickens in the bathtub?
Oh,
What's
yes.
that story?
Well, Mother, she took these eggs, and she of course she knew the proportion of roosters she had to have to the hens to fertilize the eggs, and that she would put them up, and she had a little window kind of thing, and she could tell the fertilized eggs from the non-fertilized. So she would take the fertilized eggs, and she had an incubator that was in the one little room upstairs, right in the corner. And in the spring of the year, she would set that incubator at a certain temperature, and the eggs would hatch. I don't know if it was 3 or 4 weeks, something like that. And of course, we had little chickens peeping out, and we'd be so it was so much fun to go up there and see how many more little chickens pecked through the, egg. And then when they were all, as they hatched, then she took them downstairs into the warmest place. The warmest place was the bathroom next to the kitchen, and the only place she had to put them in was the bathtub. So she put them in of course, she had a box she had fixed for them, and she put the little chickens in there. So they went peep, peep, peep all day long. You could hear them. But it wasn't very handy when you wanted to take a bath. You had to always take the chickens out first. Then you could have your bath.
And your dad, my grandfather, what did he do? A harness shop?
Oh, Dad had a harness shop. He had everything that you could think of for horses. He sold the horse shoes, and the horse blankets. He had many blankets all over, and then he made the harnesses. He had a little back room in his shop, and he knew how to cut the leather to make harnesses, and so that's what he did.
And now, wasn't there a story about some scar on your
Oh
arm?
yes, one day he wanted to go to the store for something, and
How old are you, Mom?
I was about 5, I guess. And he said, Marie, he said, you stay here just in case anybody comes, tell them I'll be right back. And don't touch anything. And so, of course, at 5 years old, you don't mind what your father tells you to do. And I was always intrigued by that. He had a cutting. It was a round circular thing that you could cut the leather with, and it looked like so much fun. I thought, well, there was a high stool, and I stepped up on that stool, and I was going to make a harness, but it slipped, and I got cut in my arm, and I have a scar to this day.
Do you want to show us your scar?
It won't show up
Oh, it
there.
won't show. Okay.
But I can't remember if he spanked me or not. I don't think he did. I don't ever remember that he spanked me. I guess he thought I was cut and I was punished enough.
And what's the story of your father and the gypsies?
Well, I used to, in the summertime, this would be, Mother would fix Dad a lunch, because he didn't want to leave his place of business. And I had a little blue pail that I carried his lunch in.
Oh, that Mary Kay has now.
Yes, she
That,
has. And I had to pass the bakery. Now, the bakery was right on the corner from our house. Our house was just about a block off the main street. And if you went a block, east and west, right on the corner was the bakery. And then over here would be my dad's place of business. So it wasn't very far. But the gypsies used to come to town. And as I passed the bakery, Mrs. Litsky, who lived across the street from us, but she ran the bakery. She says, "Come here quick, Marie." And she had to hide me back in amongst the ovens, so when the gypsies came in, for fear that they would take me. So I remember that, yeah. And they'd come in, and some of them would come the back way and some of the front way, and they were terrible to get rid of. And they used to make occasional visits to that town for some reason or other.
Do you think they really took kids, or was that just an old folk tale, you think?
Well, I think maybe they did, but they didn't take any to Olivia. But anyway, that scared me.
Yeah. And then your dad, when he was how old? He started to get sick?
Well, it was about that time when I was between 5 and 6, I guess.
And he was like in his 40s?
He was a diabetic, and of course in those days there was no insulin or nothing. They simply starved him, and he ended up in the hospital in St. Paul, and Mother had to take care of the business, all day, all week. And the weekends, she and I would hop the train, and I always remember that it was early in the morning. It'd be dark, And I still get that fear of a train coming, or it was not fear but excitement, I guess, of getting in there, and that was it made a big impression on me. And then they'd leave us off at the depot, but we'd have to take a streetcar to the hospital. And I don't know where we stayed, but we stayed overnight anyway. And one Sunday morning when we were coming back, the streetcar was a little late, I guess, and we were a little late, and we had to run. There's a whole bunch of steps down to the depot, and this black man came, and he just took me up in his arms and ran down the steps, and Mother was running ahead, and he was able to make that train stop, because she says, "I have to get on that train. I have to go," and so. They stopped for her and let us out, but I was scared of that man. We didn't see black people that time. Now we wouldn't think anything of it. But I was very frightened, and that stayed with me a long time.
So your father died when you were 6.
6, and I had just started the first grade in school. The nuns there were beautiful people. They were very compassionate. And they knew that I had lost my father, and this was a big thing. And Mother was kind to them, too. They couldn't come and have a meal with you like they can now, but they could come and visit the sick, and they would come and visit Mother, And in the course of time, the Sister Ida was the music teacher, and she made a proposition with Mother that if she would allow her to, she would give me free music lessons if I would practice there, because she wanted to make a musician out of me. And so Mother, of course, consented to that, and I started taking piano lessons from Sister Ida, and that went on for many years, while I was there. And she could be in the far corner. You see, the convent where the sisters lived, where they had their, bedrooms and their kitchen and all that, was separate, but it was also the school, And as I grew just a little bit older, I learned to march. And when the kids came into school, they had to form 2 lines: girls in one line and boys in another line. You never went crisscross. and I played a march until they all got to their rooms and in their seats.
Huh.
That was what I had to do.
Not the old fireman's march by any chance.
No, it
They used to
wasn't.
play for us.
But it was a march. Yeah, that's right. And sister could be in the far corners of the building, and she would know if I wasn't counting, and she'd know and she'd holler, "Marie, are you counting?" And then if she'd come and stand by me, she'd count on my shoulder like this. Well, she succeeded in getting me to be able to play the piano pretty well, and I played it all their concerts that they had, and then when I was in the 7th grade, she taught me how to play the organ in church. Now that's not like a pipe organ. You had pedals, that you had to keep pedaling, otherwise there'd be no music. And then if you wanted it to be loud, you had to you had to go like this with your knees, and then that would make it get louder, softer, louder, softer. But you had to keep pedaling all the time that you were playing, and so I played the organ from the time I was a 7th grade till I was a senior, and then I had enough of it. I had missed a lot because I had to be there every Sunday morning for Mass, and in the evening, Father had devotions, just 10 or 15 minutes, but I had to be there for that to play a piece so they could sing. And so I never could go with my other friends to do anything, So I gave it up in my senior year, and that was it.
Going back to that Christmas after your father died, you had a special Christmas memory.
Oh, yes, the first Christmas. The Santa Claus came in a big sleigh, of course, and Mother, as all the mothers did, took their children down to the place where he was supposed to stop and give out treats. And when he saw me, he took me up in his sleigh.
Oh.
That was a very memorable day for me.
And you skipped a grade, you brilliant person.
No, I wasn't brilliant. The sisters could kind of arrange things to their own convenience once in a while, and this didn't turn out to be a gift to me at all. But they pretended, so they had a spelling bee, and I was good in spelling, and I won the bee. So then I got to go into the 5th grade and skip the 4th grade. Well, any of you know who have children, you know that that's not a good thing. In 3rd grade, you learn all the multiplication, all those things. And in the 4th grade, you learn division. And in the 5th grade, you have fractions. Well, I skipped long division entirely and went from multiplication to fractions. And but Sister would keep me after school and try and teach me the 4th grade arithmetic. Well, you know how that'd be at the end of the day at school. Naturally, I didn't get it very well, so I never was good in arithmetic. I had problems all through. In fact, even in the 7th and 8th grades, I was having problems, and I didn't learn how to solve those problems until I started to teach in school. And then when I had to teach it, then I learned how to do it.
And sometimes the sisters would even have you eat at the convent?
Oh, yes. If, any rainy day or any stormy day, either they would call my mother and say, Marie's gonna stay and eat with us, or Mom would call them, But I didn't eat at the table with the nuns. That was their sacred place. But I could eat it out in the kitchen. And I wasn't too happy because, sometimes I didn't like the vegetables, especially carrots. There'd be a little piece of meat and some potatoes, but then there'd be a whole half a plate of carrots. And I wouldn't eat them. Well, I couldn't go out to recess and play until I went and ate those carrots. So I ate cold carrots many times. I'm surprised I like them, but they are still my favorite.
So if you didn't finish them at lunch, you'd have to come back at recess?
I couldn't go out to recess and play. I'd have to go and eat my carrots. To this day, I've learned to clean my plate because that was you did not leave anything on your plate. Now, some of you mothers of little children, just think about that.
And what did you like to do as a youngster?
Oh, I loved to roller skate. That was my big thing. I never had a bike, but I just loved to roller skate.
And you'd go on the streets
Yes,
or the
all the
sidewalks?
streets around Olivia.
Okay.
You know, it wasn't very large. I could go most anywhere, and I used to like to especially roller skate on new sidewalks someplace. And then we jumped rope a lot. We had all kinds of little things to little
Like little
poems.
rhymes
Yeah,
and stuff?
yeah.
Do you remember any of them? Do you do teddy bear?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
'Cause we
touch the ground,
teddy bear, turn around.
Yeah, yes, that's right. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
And who were your friends when you were a little one?
Well,
Egga.
Evelyn Freeman was a very good friend of mine from first grade on.
Mm-hmm.
Her father was an attorney, and her mother was a social person. They had a beautiful home, and they had a full-time maid. And I can't tell you, I ate meals there constantly, and that's where I learned a lot about social life. The table was always set with the finest linen and the best dishes and
Silverware. all
and
the forks.
everything. Yes, and everything. And the father would always serve the meat, And
Now,
all
Evelyn
this kind-
Freeman, that was Egga, right?
Yes,
You called her
yeah,
Egga?
yes, she had the nickname Egga, and Egga and I were friends all through school. In fact, she was my maid of honor at my wedding.
Mm. And then her maid's name was Blah.
Yeah, well, her
Okay.
name was Clara, but Egga couldn't say Clara when she was little, so she called her Blah, and that stuck with her.
Mm-hmm. And then another friend of yours, Zelia?
Yeah, Zelia Haney was another. We three were very close.
Uh-huh.
Her father was the sheriff, and her mother had died, and they lived in the jail. And I used to spend a lot of time there, and we'd hear these people come in shouting and raging, and Zelia and I'd be curled up in a corner kind of peeking through the crevices to see who it was,
Uh-huh.
But I decided I wouldn't like to live there forever like she did.
And the three of you went on a trip?
Yes, this trip was a couple years after I was teaching, and after your father and I had bought our first car.
Mm-hmm.
It was a Chevy Coupe, and I think we bought it for $125. And so we decided, with the three of us, to go on a trip before school started that one year. And we each took, I think it was $10. And we told Aggie, now you can't take more. No, just $10 a piece in the kitty, But we were going to take food from home and everything. Well, with that $10 a piece, of course, Aggie did cheat her father, but made her take some more money. But we didn't know it.
Uh-huh.
And but with that $10, I'll tell you what we did. Well, the first meals that we were going to go up north to Itasca State Park, and we went to Duluth. And we went to Superior.
Mm-hmm.
And, I have to tell you about Blah. She was the one that got up early in the morning when we left about 5 o'clock. And she came out with several logs because she knew that Duluth had a steep hill. And if we started to go down the hill, Egga was supposed to go and put a log in front
of the car?
Yes. I don't know how Blah thought we were going to do
Jump out of the rolling car.
But we took the logs along anyway because she was so worried about it. Now her father and mother didn't care. They didn't come out and say goodbye, but Blah did, And we had many laughs, and we did see this was a steep hill in Duluth, but I used my brakes, and that was okay.
And they worked.
Yeah. And then we ate out one night. We dressed all up, and we ate out one time. Of course, you didn't have to pay $5 for a meal like you do now.
Mm-hmm.
But we ate out, and we took a trip on a ship on Lake Superior, and we were able to pay that and our gas. We came home on a Sunday night, I think, and the gas tank was empty. I didn't have one penny in my purse.
Wow.
And didn't know that Egga had some her dad's stuff the day before I gave her some money. So we wouldn't have been stranded, but could have been if we had any trouble,
If Egga had kept to her $10.
Yeah, if she had kept to the $10.
Well, Mom, we just can't talk about your days in school without talking about Stanley Kern.
Oh. Well, Stanley and I could have probably had a relationship if it hadn't been for a few things. We, back in the days going back to the 7th and 8th grade, Father Pommier was our pastor, and he was a very stern man. You know, he was the one that gave sermons that, like, you're all going to hell, you know, and pound.
Fireman.
And yes, and so anyway, on report card day, we were scared to death, and we all had to dress up. First of all, he looked at your appearance, how your hair looked, how neat your clothes were, your shoes had to be shined, your fingernails had to be done, you know, clean. And so you had to pass that first, and then he took the report card. Well, I got through it okay and got back to my seat, and Stanley came up, and he didn't have his tie. The boys had to wear shirts and ties, and he didn't have his tie tied. So Father says, Marie Novak, come up here and tie Stanley's tie. Well, I had never tied a boy's tie in my life, you know, and I didn't know how it was. And you know, now in front of all your classmates up there trying to tie a boy's, you know, tie. I was so embarrassed. I'm sure I was shaking and near crying. And I didn't know what to do with that tie, so I just tied it in a knot, just a regular knot. And left it. And then I looked at Father, and he says, that's okay. So I got through that. Well, then we used to have big performances. They went to a lot of trouble in having that at the end of the year. We had costumes. The nuns would go to a department store run by the Woolperts. They were a Jewish family, and that girl was a very good friend of mine too. Very nice. And by order, just yards and yards and yards and yards of material. And everybody had to have the same thing, you know. And our mothers had to do that. They had to really
make all the costumes.
Yes.
Wow.
So this was going to be a colonial thing, and in one thing we had to dance a colonial dance. You know how they did, and the big full skirts, and I even had a white cotton wig, you know, and the whole bit. But Stanley was my partner. And I looked at him, and he had dirty hands. And I never could have liked that guy because of those dirty hands. I had to take his dirty hand, and I was all cleaned up, you know. He had his costume on, but dirty hands. So that stayed with me all my life with him. He tried to date me in high school, and it just didn't work. I just kept remembering those dirty hands. That's terrible.
Well, and he had an untied tie, dirty hands, but he also had a car.
Oh, yes. Well, one time this was, I think, at the end of the 8th year, or maybe it was the beginning of the freshman. And I think
so you were like 14.
I think it was our catechism class that we came back for, that we had to do something at church, and we had to have a practice for it. And so after practice, he wanted me to go for a ride, and I didn't want to go with him alone, so I asked my friend Tilly if she would go with us, and so she said she would. And he told me I could drive.
But you didn't have your license.
Oh, no. That didn't occur to any of us, you know. I wouldn't have been old enough to even get a license.
Oh, you were only
So we
14.
were going to go to the next town, which was Bird Island. It was just like, let's see, like what Blanchardville would have been to Argyle, 5 miles, you know, and coming back. Well, coming back, in order to enter Olivia, you could go 2 ways. You could go straight, or you could take a right turn. And I had planned to go straight. But he didn't tell me, but when we got there and he saw me going straight, he pulled on the steering wheel, and we tumbled over in a ditch. Upside down.
Upside down?
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
my.
Yeah, the wheels were on the top. Tilly got out first. She was in the back seat, so she got out, and she helped Stanley and me get out. But Stanley's wrist was bleeding badly. He had cut a artery, and we knew that. So I took my slip and tore it up into pieces and made a tourniquet, and then we walked. We were going to walk home. Probably that was about 10 blocks to our home, and. Well, we did stop. No, we did not. We didn't stop home. That's right. We went right to the park. We were shaken up and didn't know what we should do, you know. And so we went to this park, and we were sitting there for the longest time thinking, well, you know, should we go home and tell our folks? And his brother was going to be so mad about that car. And, well, you can imagine how scared we were, you know. And along came a car with my brother in it. He was driving, and he when he saw me, he didn't say, "Oh, I'm glad to see you alive." He said, "Get in the car." He says, "What's the matter with you? Everybody's at our house. You're all crying. They think you're dead." And so that was the welcome I got from my brother Van. And I don't know. It just turned out all right. I don't suppose they ever fixed the car. So, but
Whatever happened to Stanley? Do you know, as an adult?
he's a professor right now somewhere.
Woo! He must wash his hands more.
I
or
think
something.
so.
Mom, what's your biggest achievement in high school, do you think?
Well, it was my music. When I was a freshman, to start with, our high school did not have a marching band. They had an orchestra, with violins and such. And there was a place for one person to play the piano as an accompanist. And so we had tryouts, and of course the sophomores and juniors and seniors, they were all, eligible to try out. And I won that contest. So I had 4 years of playing with the band, and it was beautiful. I loved it. We got to all the things and didn't have to pay for anything. We played at all the athletic events, all the plays, and anything that came up that needed music, we played for it. And I also then accompanied the choruses, the girls' chorus, and things like that. So that was a lot of fun in my life. I just loved it.
And after graduation, you didn't go to college. You want to tell us about
Well,
that?
no. My mother gave me an option. If I took an exam and passed it, I could take a year of normal training right at the Olivia High School, free of charge, and be eligible to start teaching country school and earning money. And of course, she didn't have too much money to send me to college with, so I took the exam and I passed it, and then I took a year's training, and so that was over with in 1932. In the fall of 1932, I began teaching. I was 18 years old. And my ability to speak the Czech language came out very well with me because I was persistent, and everybody was out of work at this time. Now, this was during the Depression in the 1931-32 years, and especially there was nothing for girls or women to do, and so my brother went with me, and we'd go out to the farm to the clerk, and he put me off, and finally I said to Van, "We're going out another time," and I said, "I am not coming home until they say yes." So when we got to this place where the clerk lived, and his wife says, "Well, he's out in the barn milking." I went out in the barn and watched him milk and talked milking, and I'd even milked the cow if he'd asked me to. and anyway, I came home with a contract for $75 a month, and that was top in that county.
Wow.
There were teachers offering to teach that school for $35 a month. And I got 75.
And it was a one-room schoolhouse.
One-room schoolhouse, 32 children, every grade.
So it was first grade through eighth?
First through eighth.
Eighth. Okay.
First through eighth. And then in the spring, they sent their little children preschool. I had to teach them the English language because they only spoke Czech. And I was able to do that. And your 7th and 8th grade students had to pass a state exam. You couldn't pass from 7th to 8th grade unless you passed the state exam. So I had really drilled them on the things that I felt they were going to have to know, and got all of those through the 7th grade, then the 8th grade, then they got into high school.
They all passed.
And they all passed.
Wow.
I was there for 2 years, and then it was 12 miles from my home, so I had 12 miles to drive every day. And that was really hard sometimes. Well, one time I had to stay out there a whole week and live with a family because, the snows in Minnesota.
Yeah.
I think they had drifts 10 feet high, I'm sure.
They didn't close the school?
They were supposed to. Everybody else did. And I called and asked my clerk if they would close. Well, no, they didn't want to close the school then because there wasn't anything for the boys to do, but they wanted to have the boys home in the spring when there was some work for them to do. So I was supposed to go there every morning and build a fire and stay there about an hour, then close the school and go home.
Because nobody would come.
because nobody would come.
Oh.
But they could call that a day of school.
Oh, because you went and
Yeah,
had it
because I
open.
was there, yeah. So.
Oh. And then what about after teaching? What did you...
Well, at the end of my 4th year of teaching, of course, your father, Jim, got all this time. He graduated with me in 1931, and his uncle was a very good friend of the publisher of the Olivia Times.
That was Uncle Tom.
Yeah,
Okay.
so he got him a job as an apprentice in the Olivia Times Publishing Company, and that's where Dad learned that trade. And so he was working there, and he knew that they needed a girl to be a local and society editor, so I applied for that, and I got that job. It turned out to be local and society editor, full bookkeeper. I did all the bookkeeping. I did all the cleaning in the office and stuff. And,
Proofreading, too?
All the proofreading, yes. So that was all under the title of local and society editor. But in addition to that, I also learned a lot, from I used to the Mr. Landy, who was the publisher, was a staunch Democrat, and he got to get a job in the Internal Revenue Office, and so that he was really a very good writer, and I copied his style in many cases when I had to, when we had our own newspaper.
And how long did you work there at the Olivia Times?
Well, until 1936, and then we were married. And let's see, yeah, that's right. Joanne was born in 1937, and then Jim and I felt that we knew enough about the paper. We were just doing the whole thing anyway. And we knew that we could never buy Mr. Landy out. He would have to have too much money. So we were kind of looking for a little newspaper to buy, and we heard about the Argyle Atlas, and we came to look at it and liked it, and decided we were going to buy it. So Jim's uncle loaned us the $4,000 to buy the paper, which we were able to pay back in 2 years.
Wow.
So we were successful in that field, and we published the Argyle Atlas for 25 years. And that was in June of '65, and in July 2nd, Dad died. So that was...
Yeah. So you purchased the paper in June of 40.
Yes.
And Dad died in 65. Yeah. And then you worked as a secretary.
Yes, and that just came to me too. The Lord was just so good to me all my life because I didn't even ask for it. But we had Jim, who took a leave of absence from his job at Neenah with the paper
American
company.
Can?
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
Is that where he was?
I think it was. And we published the paper for 7 months. He had to leave that long, and the week before the 7 months were over, we were able to sell the paper. And then the one of the members of the school board came to me and said, "Well, what are you going to do now?" And I said, "I don't know." I still had 4 kids in the school, and I had 4 children in grade school and 2 in high school at home yet, and 2 in college. And so I said, I didn't. He said, "Well, how would you like to be secretary? We need a secretary at the high school." And I said, "Well, I'd give it a try." So I did, and I was a secretary at the high school then until that would be, let's see, 65 for 6 years in '72, and then I started having breathing problems. It was difficult for me to climb up the stairs, and so I found out I had bronchial asthma, and so then I quit that job, and in 2 years then I moved to Madison.
And the rest of that is Herstory.
Yeah,
History.
that's right.
Mom, who do you admire?
Well, back in those days, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was running for president, and that was when, I have to tell you, when I graduated from high school, I got $17 for all my gift money. Now that was a lot of money back in those days. I know you grandchildren now think nothing of getting $50 or $100 probably, but I was very proud. I never had any money. And so I took the $17 and went right to the bank and opened a checking account. They would let me do that for $17. And I got my little checkbook, and I just felt so big, you know. And so I had gone, and Mother's birthday was June 5th, and I had gone to the store and picked out the nicest lace tablecloth for her. And so on her birthday, I went to pick it up, and I had my checkbook, and I started to write the check, and the lady said, "That's no good." Oh, I said, yes, I had put money in the bank. And she says, "Marie," she said, "the bank closed this morning."
Oh.
So there went my money.
And your mother's
and my mother never got a birthday present.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you admired FDR?
So yes, and he stood for all the things that I believed in, and in fact, Dad and I went to see him. He came through Wilmer on his campaign trail, and so we went to Wilmer and we saw and shook hands with him. And then the song "Happy Days Are Here Again" was at the top of my list.
Yeah.
I belong to the Catholic Order of Foresters, and I used to play for after their meetings. They would dance, and two of my friends, Blitz Donnelly, played the drums, and Harry Haney, Zelia's brother, played the trumpet, and then I played the piano. We played for a dance, so we played "Happy Days Are Here Again" many, many, many times, and it came out to be very true. It took a Democrat to get us out of the economy.
Ooh, I didn't prompt that. So, Mom, why don't we end with having you tell us what your wish is for your children?
Well, our goal when we had our 11 children, Dad and I decided that we wanted them all to get through college because we did not have a chance to have a college education, and it was mighty rough for us. We learned the hard way. We got an education, I'll tell you, but it was a hard way. And we didn't want our children to have all the difficulties that we had. And so all 11 have college educations.
And is there anything else you want to say?
No, I think that about sums it up.
Okay.
Merry Christmas to you all.
Thanks, Mom. I
Okay.
love you.
I love you.
Okay. Shananika dorzeli, 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 nutter hala lupeni, lupeni. Shishalnani peppy check, rushna bali koshi check. Ti ti ti, ti ti ti, ti the buddhish blood ti ti. Yata platyat nebudu, nebudu, nebudu. Rushi puda tovaidu, tuvainu. Shishalnani peppy check, rushna bali koshi check. Ti ti ti, ti ti ti, ti the buddhish blood ti ti.